All right, welcome, Mr. Sargis Sangari.
Yes, it is. It's
Yeah,
good to be here, Terry. Much
right.
appreciate the time and effort.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for being here for an interview with us. Before we start conversations, can you please tell us your background and everything about yourself to our Korean viewers?
Yeah, my name is Sargis Sangari, Lieutenant Colonel Sargis Sangari. I'm a 20-year veteran of the U.S. Army Infantry and Special Operational Forces. I retired in 2014, established the Near East Center for Strategic Engagement, which was in the honor of the 3,000 Americans that were murdered on our soil, and also because of the first responders that we're still losing as of today, based on the effects of those attacks. My piece was that after the military, you don't really leave the service, you get retirement orders. It was still to dedicate to serving the nation with the talents I had, and recently I made the decision that I'm going to take those talents, those capabilities to Congress and be able to serve the members of the 9th Congressional District in Congress, hopefully in 2020. So I am the sole nominee on the Republican side of the House currently, and I will be going against Jan Schkowsky, who's the incumbent, unless her challenger, who's challenging her now, beats her in her primary.
Okay. All right. And I know you have like a close relationship with Korea, especially. What about it?
Look, my relationship with the Korean community started way before I even got into the service. My first duty assignment was Korea. And at that time, you had to ask for your duty assignment. So I asked to be in Korea for my first duty assignment because it was one of the most tougher assignments that you could have. And really, that's where most of the officers, lower grade, in this case, commissioned officers like me, who are lieutenants and first lieutenants, really tested their mettle. When I was in Korea, I served there for a year. I was on the DMZ. I was with the 506 Infantry. We ended up losing a soldier on the minefields there. His legs were blown off. It was an area that he wasn't supposed to be in, unfortunately. When I was there, that was a time also that we had one of our Black Hawk helicopters shot down by the North Koreans because it ventured into their airspace. So I've served a year there. I understand what it takes to protect U.S. interests and also the South Korean people by being on the most forwardly deployed battalions at that time in the U.S. Army. Following that, my relationship always existed because I realized that there's a closeness between the Korean people and our people. The Assyrian Church of the East in 670 AD was the first church to ever establish itself in Korea. So the first Christian church ever established was the Assyrian Church, which went through China, went through Japan, and that area. And ever since then, I've had a very close relationship with members that have served in the military, Korean military, ROK Army, to include individuals who are part of security apparatuses that either train individuals here that are from the Korean community businesses or actually have relationships there with their individuals that provide security and personal security protection. And I had an opportunity recently to go back there just a few days ago.
Okay. So you just recently visited Korea, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Just tell me about the story when you were there. What did you do?
Well, look, part of it was I wanted to also go there and see if what I know about Korea is still relevant. There's certain things I wanted to do when it came to strategic assessment. My company, Near East, has provided strategic assessment of what's happening in Southeast Asia. If your viewers have a chance, they can go to the Daily Herald, put my name in, Sangari, and they will see the articles I've written for Daily Herald on China and what is happening within the region. I was one of the first individuals to ever stand on stage in front of the Korean community going back almost 3 years ago now, it will be, where I spoke about the fact that this unification will take place. This is even before anyone had thought about it. Even the current POTUS, President of the United States, who was talking about possibly fighting against North Korea. Prior to that, was talking about how South Korea needs to establish itself economically, get ready to be able to be this linkage with the businesses that are here in our district to be able to support this unification, because it will take very much money and economic stresses that are going to be alleviated off of South Korea. Unfortunately, what I saw there when I went there, we saw the testing by North Korea of a new engine for their ICBM, and that happened on 7th of December, which is the day that the Japanese conducted the surprise attack against the United States at Pearl Harbor. And prior to that, in October, they had also done, North Korea had conducted a test off of a submarine platform. So now you combine the two, it was one of those pieces that I needed to look at key that now heightens this possible security issue on what we thought would be peace on the Korean Peninsula, which is a possibility of North Korea can launch any type of ICBM off of their submarine platforms with a nuclear warhead against any American city. And the unfortunate portion of that is that the current POTUS, President of the United States, Trump, had brought the North Korean leadership to the table, but with everything that is happening in Washington and all the distractions that were taking place, and what the current Moon administration is doing in South Korea, it has put South Korea in a much more weaker position and U.S. strategy to be able to handle those issues. And I could talk a little bit more about those if you have the time as far as the issues are concerned.
Okay, so you think it's still kind of like dangerous situations in Korea?
Yes, the danger in Korea is much more greater than I had seen before. On the 71st anniversary of South Korea becoming a nation, President Moon stood on stage and never even mentioned South Korea in his speech, which to me was a very much of a trigger that something's wrong here. Imagine if on 4th of July, President Trump stands on stage and never mentions America. That in itself was a negative. So when I went down to look at what was happening, some things are very much key to us. That we had a American perspective of putting sanctions to bring North Korea to the table. President Moon opened up a liaison office on the DMZ where I had served. However, that liaison office with North Korea established at least 50 major construction projects that bypassed what we were trying to do with the sanctions. So in itself, what he did was go against our sanctions to be able to support South Korea. At the same time, the Japanese government was sending industrial chemicals to South Korea, which are dual uses that could be used for weapons of mass destruction. And there were 200 violations of those cases. When Japan realized that a lot of those industrial chemicals are making their way to North Korea through South Korea, they put South Korea on a hold, requiring them in accordance to the international law to be able to at least give us a reporting requirements as to what's happening. And instead of President Moon trying to address that issue, he threatened to tear up the only security agreement that the U.S. had pushed between South Korea and also Japan. And if it wasn't for us putting pressure again on the current administration in South Korea, he may have torn that up. President Moon's approach is what is called a blood and soil approach on nationalism, but is far left, and it really doesn't consider the reality that it is not a division piece between these allies, because what we were getting technology-wise from Japan was to support secure South Korea. The other piece that he has taken steps on is removing land mines. As I told you, we had lost a soldier who had lost his legs while I was there years ago or decades ago, and to remove those. Now, there's no housing that is built along North and South Korea at the DMZ, but when you remove these, this is where the Secretary of State Pompeo was adamant that this is actually weakening the position of the U.S. forces in the region, because there's no need for you to alleviate these stresses. I think with the steps that he has taken, is really degraded the ability of South Korea's economy. Now, when I was there, I recommended to the individuals that were listening, I said, look, South Koreans have done wonderful. You were at this level when it came to education and business, and in a short period of time on your own, with your talents, capability, you brought yourself to a high level. LG, Samsung, these companies became major companies that you didn't steal intellectual property like China steals. You build it on your own. It is time to use this for your ability to be able to have a say on the world platform. And one of the places my recommendation was, because we have, my company operates in Middle East a lot as far as advisory capability is concerned, to use it there. Because if you notice, China, North Korea, Iran, US, Russia, everybody's fighting in the Middle East, and they're fighting with their surrogates in the Middle East. But it would be much better for Korea, which is a neutral, capable country that has developed these abilities, to be able to have a presence there. Now, yes, Samsung is present there, LG is present, but there's no one from the Korean community to represent those companies specifically on the ground to expand. So who's trying to expand there? The Chinese are trying to expand there. Who's trying to expand there? Other nations are fighting or trying to expand. And eventually, the resources that are in the Middle East are very much important pieces of what is needed to be able to support the South Korean economy. My worry is, from what President Moon is doing and going against the current administration we have in the United States, to try to force this common understanding of victory for South Korea when it comes to a political victory. He's literally bringing South Korea to a level that equals it with North Korea. And unfortunately, part of the decision he made, he went against the Constitution of South Korea, where 2 sailors from North Korea who had defected were sent back to North Korea with no trial, with no support. In that capacity, he actually went against the South Korean Constitution, which says South Korea is the only nation that is recognized for the Korean people and recognized North Korea. And at the same time, by doing that, we all know that China is a major controller of North Korea, and North Korea will do the biddings of China. It puts the South Korean businesses at a disadvantage to China. And China, we all know how it manipulates the market for its advantage and wants and desires. And these are some of the learning lessons that I saw there, which I brought back, and these are the warnings from me to the Korean people, that if you truly want to see a change and effect, you have to have a much more of a realistic approach on unification. And what is happening today is literally a surrender of South Korea to North Korea on North Koreans' platform and talking points.
Okay. Yeah, I was trying to ask about like any kind of advice to the current current administration's Korea, but I think you well mentioned about it.
There's plenty of advice you could give them. Look, I mentioned that I'm running in the 9th. Jan Shkowski, who's currently the incumbent, she's tied to represented Korean people through this Korea Peace Now movement. And in itself, Korea Peace Now movement is taking very steps that are not realistic to try to come to unification. Unfortunately, if the Korean people don't have their own Korean representative in Korea, they cannot talk relevantly about these issues. Okay. You know, my time that I've served in Korea as a soldier, and the time that I've served with having links with the Korean people, especially in Korea, is tied really towards me educating myself over the period of 30 years now on the required, needed things where I can sit and relatively give some ideas as to how I would approach this unification. And unfortunately, the way it's moving now, I think the only answer you'll have is in the 2020 April election. And if the current Moon administration gets 2/3 of the assembly, I don't think there's going to be much movement on maybe reversing some of the losses that have taken place from an American strategic perspective to support South Korea and its economy going forward.
Let's talk about the Congress runnings. and everything. I know you've been like running for the candidates for the Congress, representing the Illinois. Can you tell me more about it?
Well, look, I made a decision that I wanted to run a while ago. I'm an Assyrian. I was born in Iran, and I live in the 9th Congressional District. Jan Shkowski is been there for 20 years as the incumbent. She has a challenger now, so if she doesn't lose in the primary, I would be the de facto nominee from the Republican Party, challenging her on not just domestic but foreign policy issues. And if your TV station thinks it is viable for the Korean people, that maybe she isn't even invited here so we can sit and debate different approaches to foreign policy when it comes to supporting the Korean Peninsula, a strategic ally, and what the Korean people want, then if you guys invite, and I'm willing to sit here and debate those different approaches and show where some of those flaws are. Now, with that said, it's very relevant for me that for the next year I'm going to be on stage, and I have a means and ways at least to dialogue on what are the issues that are significantly affecting the Korean community, not just here in the 9th Congressional District, but how we can leverage our businesses, our younger generation, our abilities, our ties to be able to support what is important for us when it comes to this. While I was working with the Near East, the current incumbent, Jan Shkowski, supported Obama's plan for Iran when it came to the nuclear deal, which my company called an economic deal a long time ago. Now, I'm an Iranian-born Assyrian Christian, so that affected my family directly. So not only was the current incumbent wrong about how to approach Iran, and affected my personal family directly, she's wrong about her approach when it comes to the unification issues of North and South Korea. And she has been wrong on different foreign policy perspectives. So I made a decision a long time ago. I said, look, if we're not at the table, we're not going to have a say, because I've been here, my company's been here, I've been in Skokie for 5 years. At any time, the current incumbent could have reached out and said, Colonel Sangari, give me your perspective on the Iran issue. Never once. Colonel Sangari, give me your perspective on issues of Korea, because you have so many deep ties. Never approached me once. Because of that, I said I need to get to the table to have a say, because how I see the process going currently is not going to be advantageous to us. And this has nothing to do about winning or losing an election. This has to do with ensuring that there's a dialogue and a debate on these issues, because these are important. You have extended family members that are in South Korea. Their lives, their future, their economy is going to be in jeopardy. And there should be at least relevant discussions by people who are policymakers on stage and from the community that is supposed to be represented to unsolve those issues. And for me, the more important piece is the fact that our churches are linked. And that church relationship is of utmost importance to me. And one piece that I brought in here that I want to show, this was a flag that was presented to me, the Korean flag, at the National Cemetery. And I have to safekeep this flag, just like I have defended my American flag, my American nation, my adopted nation, my cultural heritage of my Assyrian people always will be defended. And the fact that this flag has been entrusted to me, and when I came back, I went to the Arlington National Cemetery and presented it at the Korean bench, which is a representation of the men and women who died during the Korean War, that we need to continue this moving forward. Otherwise, those 70-plus years of relationship that we've had and established together will be sold out by the Chinese and by individuals who have no interest to ensure that in the long run, South Korea, the people, Korean people of the 9th Congressional District, and American people here who are American citizens of Korean descent and Assyrian descent be able to be successful in support of the future of our next generation.
Okay. So what I understand about you is when you get elected for the Congress, you're going to be an advocate for the Korean community and also for unification of the Korean Peninsula.
I have always been. I have always been an advocate before I even decided to run. So it's not just being in Congress that I'm going to do it. I've done it before being in Congress, but in Congress at least you have someone who understands the smart approach, is able to lay out the facts on how to get there. Like I said, I haven't seen a plan by anyone yet to say, when East and West Germany united, they were much closer to each other culturally. The Korean people, I said, I was interviewed on Korean TV before with Yasun Yoon, who's running currently in the 17th. And I said, it's a tragedy of the world that the two Koreas have not united, but over the past 70 years, they have distinctively created different cultural mindsets for themselves because they've been two different countries operating under two different perspectives. It takes time to bring these folks together. When West Germany was at the highest, most capable ability it had, its economy swallowed up East Germany. That was really occupied by the Russians. Well, even there were maturations, problems, issues. Imagine what's happening now. South Korean economy is suffering. South Korea has internal issues where it's literally dropping on an equal setting with North Korea. It cannot even handle one individual within the social structure because majority of its citizens come from the social sector, or service sector, I should say, and the service sector cannot be maintained because of what's happening with the growth rates, especially the younger folks coming in. So it's teetering on the point of collapse. It is our ability as being Koreans, Assyrians, that are living in the West, that have established ourselves in strong business, strong capabilities, to be able to alleviate those pressures on homeland in order to be able to support American foreign policy in the region and our ancestral linkages, to honor them. And I hope that we'll get an opportunity over the next year. At least I'll propose ideas and plans. And if those ideas and plans are adopted by others, God bless it, so be it. If not, then at least I can tell you that I will be the one who will be executing those from the table, because until you're at the table, you don't have a say.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Thank you very much about like every thoughts on our the Korean, the homeland. All right. Can you? Yeah. I think we're gonna to close the conversations. Before we close, can you say a last words to our Korean viewers?
We are the people of the same color. And when that is said, that is a translation in the Korean terms, meaning we are the same. So I am going to do my best to at least address the issues that are important to the Korean people. Now, I do know that the current administrations in Korea have a lot of backing from constituents in my district. And they may not like what I say when it comes to the facts, but my job as a professional is to lay those out and explain to you that it's not about getting votes and garnering votes. It is to ensure that I do my due diligence, if I truly love the Korean people, to tell you, here is the problems you're facing, and here's the means and ways maybe we can address it. There's not one right way to get to the end point or the end goal, but there is a process and a mechanism that we all have to agree upon that is much beneficial, not just to us as Korean Americans here and Assyrian Americans, and it is to the Koreans that are in Korea currently, in South Korea, which I have defended, to ensure that that relationship that we've established on the battlefields of Korea, battlefields of Vietnam, that is extended in the next 100 years to 200 years. And it just not end based on one administration making decisions that might be beneficial for us, either or.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Well, again, thanks for being here with the interview with us. And I hope every business happens in your campaign and everything, every life, it's been successful.
Thank you very much. I hope you can go to Vote Sangari. You'll see some of the interviews we've done, and we do need money and support, which is important for the campaign, and we are looking for individuals from the Korean community to volunteer. It gives us an opportunity to train them as election judges, I should say poll watchers, and hopefully bring them into the campaign process so at least they understand how it works. I'll be an advocate for the Korean people. But at the end of the day, you have one of your own running, Yasu Yoon. You need to get your Korean Americans into Congress at multiple levels. If you do that, it alleviates a lot of the issues and problems I'm discussing today.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you.